Translation is something that we do every day, especially those who are living in out of state, like maybe a Malayalis living in Karnataka. And now that Karnataka has kind of made the learning of Kannada stricter, so the kind of pride that Karnataka attaches to its language is obvious. And it should be like that also, for the identity from where you come from, your culture and all that, yeah. And the same point, by extension, you see, when a Malayali settles down abroad, I don't say outside Kerala, even outside India. For Paul Zacharias, Salam America it's a story. Like a young man from Kaduthuruthi, how he lives in a New York condominium and remains out and out a Malayali, incurably a Malayali, and getting trapped within his Malayaliness. That's a story about. So this Malayali, wherever he is, he doesn't change into whatever cosmopolitan or Medil Radhakrishnan's Pradhalin Urukuna, a mushroom for breakfast. He is a techie, at the pinnacle of his career, living in Czechoslovakia, and the pre-Iron Curtain falling. That kind of a situation here. So when Medil Radhakrishnan describes a mushroom for breakfast, the entire thing, the entire milieu, there is a maid, everyone is dreaming about a Malayali breakfast. So this is the kind of Malayaliness that is projected through Malayalam characters, wherever they live. So in translation, to bring this about, you don't have to do much. Maybe, if it is idli, you use the word idli. You don't use the word steamed rice cake. Idli is idli. Like that, idli and chutney. It goes everywhere. No, it is like Shashi Tharoor has made it now international, universal. So these are the small tricks that the translators trade, involves, using culture-specific items, retaining culture-specific items, and inviting the attention of the reader to that particular culture. If you make it plain, like a carpenter planes out everything and make it available for the target language reader, that used to be this is the politics of translation. So if pre-independence translation used to be in Dumerc's translation of Indulekha, the translator was trying to make it palatable to the translator, the target language reader. That's not necessary at all. It is another kind of life that we have. It is another kind of imagination that we have. It is another kind of engagement with literature that we have.
Flavors, there are dialects, there's a patois, as we call it. So the question is, do you attempt to translate those local flavors of Malayalam at all? Or is it that you try to keep it in a very neutral tone, which is understood by everybody in a very neutral way? So how do you approach the variances within the language? I mean, because every writer has a style. And we saw Mukundan sir this morning, who has, again, a very diverse, eclectic style. So the challenge for a translator is really, how do you bring not just one kind of Malayalam to an audience, but various kinds of Malayalam? So how do you approach that, particularly in the short story collection, which spans a variety of writers and themes?
It's quite a task. This has been one of the criticisms, especially Bashir. People were asking, in the reviews, at least 2 reviews, people pointed it out, because Bashir's language, this particular Vishwavikhyathamaya Mukha, the world now knows, is not, that kind of difficult to translate language, because only his satire, his sarcastic language, his satiric language, that has a pattern in any case. But there are other stories, like Bashir's, which is nearly untranslatable if you translate it. So is O.N.V. Kurup's lyrics. You will not get the smell and the taste and the sound. What Kurup sir told me was Thomas, if you're translating my poems into English, make sure that they read as poems in English, not as faithful rendering of my uh, Malayalam words, which are relevant only in Malayalam. So whatever is relevant in the English translation, do that. That's the one author who told me to do that. Use my discretion to recreate in English what his, the approximation of his poem. So that is ONV's greatness, I would say. But that said, I would say that trying to imitate patois or colloquial, not only colloquial, there are particular registers, languages used in particular demographic groups. For example, Bashir's uneducated Muslim, especially women of Talayola, Paramba, Vaikam and that area. Yeah. Not Malabar. Not Malabar. He's from Vaikam, Talayola, Paramba. That's what he has said. Not Malabar. There is a mistake like that. It's not that. So it is not quite possible because Asher himself said, Ronald Asher, who translated, the great three novellas of Bashir, what he said was he tried to imitate the kind of, he tried to replace Bashir's special language with language of the East Midland. They kind of, not exactly East Midland, I forget the, one particular patois that he tried that first. Then he found that it won't make any sense, not in the original, not in the translated. So it is not, it is not at all equivalent to what Bashir wrote in Malayalam. If he recreates it in a similar kind of patois in English. So the only way, again, this Salam America is written in the patois of Kaduthurthi, Koravalangad, that kind of belt. So what I did in translation, because I got the Katha award for that. So what I did was keeping the narrative strong, using a neutral language. Right. Tell the story, not the peculiarity or idiosyncrasy of the language. That is what I did.
So I guess that is the dilemma of a translator, right? How do you bridge these worlds, So coming to N. Mohanan's work, which, the work I have translated is actually one of the legends, one of the origin myths of Kerala, which is the Parayipetta Pandirigulam, which is the initial dwellers of Kerala. They came from a Paraya, an outcast lady who was married to a Brahmin scholar, and the children they spawned are actually the forebearers of who we know as of all the descendants in Kerala. So if you see, the writer of this is N. Mohanan, right? And of course there is a short story by N. Mohanan in this collection too. But if you look at a writer like N. Mohanan, I don't know how many of you have read N. Mohanan. His style is actually very lyrical, very romantic, so it kind of eschews the very local dialects or that kind of a tone is not there in his writing. So I felt that, N. Mohan's writing is very deeply personal. So in that sense, it is a short story. He writes long form, but actually the essence of it is like a short story, very intense focus on the protagonists and all that. So so that's the peculiarity of N. Mohanan's writing. The book is, called...
Can I ask you the question,
Sure.
Because instead of getting into the spirit of the
Go ahead,
act, well, this is the one book you have translated of N. Mohanan. And what really drew you or attracted you to take up this
So like I was saying, this is a very, this is a very fascinating story. I found it when I first came across it, and my mother read it for me. It's about the very conflicted inner life of a character who is a rationalist, and who is a firm believer in, a very objective way of living, and how he finds that his life is actually overtaken by destiny in spite of his resistance. He finds the course of events in his life is actually dictated by destiny. And though there are many books on this, this is N. Mohanan's book on this origin is not the only one. There are many chronicles of this by many other writers. But what I found is that while the others are just chronicling the sequence of events, N. Mohanan takes a very intimate account of this thing, and he focuses only on the inner life of Vararuchi, the Brahmin scholar, and Panchami, his wife. So it is a it's a Hamlet-like introspection. Vararuchi is like a Hamlet-like character. He's questioning himself all the time. The arc of his life, starting from a very rebellious young man to uh, a reluctant father, you could say, a reluctant spouse, reluctant father. And finally, he ends up as a repentant husband, a repentant father. So the whole arc of his life is very tragic, if you see. He starts as a firm believer of, science and knowledge can conquer everything. And he goes on that path, and he finds that that's not the way it is. So I thought N. Mohan's approach to this story was very fascinating. And when my mother first read it out to me, we felt we should try to bring it to an audience which is on whom probably this legend is lost. And like I said, unlike the other writers who are situated firmly in their particular territories, this one is a language which is very lyrical, very poetic, very evocative, got a lot of atmosphere. So I was very tempted to, honestly, it's a labor of love. It is not for the rewards of being known as a writer or something, which I'm really not as a professional, right? So it is really, I wanted to bring the story to an audience on whom I thought it would be lost otherwise. That's what it is.
So this is about the lyrical, romantic appeal of the language, the creative language, which
Yep.
also in my case, your story, mine too, which
Yes,
I
yeah,
included
yep.
in this collection, in this anthology. You see this N. Mohanan's, like, we had, when we had the discussion outside, see O.N.V. Kurup,
Yep.
Perumbadavam Sridharan. These are, when you discuss in front of academically oriented Malayalis,
Yeah.
they look down upon you. There's one particularly well-known poet who came and put his hands around me and said, who learned very recently that I was going to translate O.N.V. Kurup.
Right.
He was
Okay.
trying to dissuade me.
Mhm.
Why should after doing this MPhil course in
Okay.
translation in School of Letters, why should you translate O.N.V. Kurup?
Okay.
So I was younger then, and I got angry with him, and I threw him out and all that.
Okay.
So this kind of attitude, again, when I translated and edited O.N.V.'s This Ancient Liar for Sahitya Academy,
Right.
that's
Okay.
Sahitya Academy publication, and I took it to one of our leading figures. I'll not name the person. He was asking me to my face, no, you do something for Ayyappa Panikar or something. Why should you do it for O.N.V.? I said, anyway, I have done this, sir, so
Okay.
I'll give you a copy. And so this same person, on another occasion when he got the Gyanpid and all that, he was celebrating,
Okay.
So this is the kind of typical Malayali, the kind of...
This is the essence that you can't take out
yeah,
of
so
Malayali.
this kind of approach that academicians or intellectuals will, I don't belong to any school. So I'm a free person. So I can translate Perumbadavam Sridharan's Udu Sankirtanam Bole as like a psalm.
Right, yeah.
I can translate O.N.V. Kurup's poems.
I think that's been translated like a psalm.
I am the one who did it.
Yeah, okay, yeah, right.
Yeah, so
Translated, okay.
it goes on like that.
Right.
So it's not a rebellious act or anything. It's an act of choice.
Right.
There is absolutely nothing that is anathema for a translator because it's my personal choice. I am not commissioned to do this. You see, I am doing it out of love, like that. So this kind of approach to N. Mohanan's story, also the loving persuasion of people close to, N. Mohanan's nephews and daughter. All these people are close to me, and if they request me to translate, I will do that. This kind of. I'm not a professional translator. I don't translate per word and like that. I wouldn't do that. So this kind of warm, personal connection I have with this work, like that, these greatest stories, most of these stories are, masterworks, which I have fallen in love with. There's absolutely no other way. So what you see here is my homage to the memory of N. Mohanan, because I had done one story, because we were living in Shastamangalam, his was the Janvila lane, mine was the Masjid lane. So I was living there, I was working in Trivandrum at the time. So knowing that I'm a translator and I'm doing, so he invited me to translate his story, Road to Tibet. Road to Tibet, Tibet Lake Lowry. So Dalai Lama was coming at the time to Kanyakumari, but that did not happen because of our government buckled under Chinese pressure. So the visit did not happen, but the story which N. Mohanan wanted to take to Dalai Lama, I translated and gave it. It was not. But later on, when I joined Indian literature, I published that story in Indian literature. So with that connection, so I had a very warm relationship with him like that. I loved his language, and that is why I took your story, mine too. And if I may reveal now, I can reveal that his Oracle is the iconic story novel, which is being celebrated by Gen Z. Lakhs and lakhs of copies have been sold because of its doing the rounds in social media like that. So this time also I was lovingly persuaded to translate it. I translated and I have submitted to come out in 2-3 months. So this is my engagement with N. Mohanan's world of writing, specifically his lyrical, romantic engagement with the creative universe. These are poets, not just basically underlying poetry. Though he writes in prose form, these are like O.N.V. Kurup's lyrics. This is the way he has created beauty.
Yeah. So if you see, taking further from what N. Mohan's style, and this whole conversation is coming to be centered around N. Mohanan, unwittingly so. We didn't want to be. But it's true, his style of writing is very lyrical, and though he writes prose, it's actually poetry underneath. So if you see the story of Vararuchi and Panchami, this in What the Rains Foretold, there is a, following the path of the two protagonists, Vararuchi and Panchami, there are a couple of birds. There are two birds who are actually foretelling destiny, and he overhears them. So actually they have a different voice. The birds actually, though it is prose, actually they're actually in a sing-song. So actually if you see the English translation, it's possible to convert it to poetry. So actually what is prose in Malayalam actually can be better expressed as poetry in English. So you kind of, so you don't, so that's the quality of the writing inherently, because when, which lends itself to different ways.
This is what I found, in Oracle, entire sections can be broken into lines. And
that's what, so the writing itself should have the quality, which lends itself to that, right? So that's something unique.
So my question again is this: why translate? This is our theme.
Okay.
So this is is it your creative urge, because you also think creatively, your creative imagination, your urge to write? You, in our conversation, brief conversation, you also confided in me that I will be sharing with the audience that you write, though you are not a published, established writer like that, but you also engage in creative writing.
Right.
So someone who is not creatively engaged cannot translate. Translation is also a kind of creative imagination
Right, very much.
you brought into another language, from one language to the other you're bringing, but you have to imagine the whole thing and you have to recreate it in that target language. So why translate? Because
I mean, like I said, it's purely, I read a good story. I thought it should be known by a wider audience outside Kerala. That was the only urge. And when I started, I had no background. I didn't have any degree in English literature or translation studies and all that. Um, Not to take that away from, I'm saying that has certainly got its great merit, but it was purely a labor of love. I didn't know what I was getting into, really. I mean, I just started from the first page, and I sat with my mother at the time. She's no more now, but I wish she were here in the audience. So we wrote page by page. My Malayalam also was not perfect. So because I'm practically a Bangalorean now, right? So that's what it is. Um, so we wrote the first draft, and then I kind of switched off the original and started thinking in English, made multiple drafts of it, and finally it went onto the computer for the final draft, and the publisher again changes it. So I mean, the short of it is, it's Thomas, it's purely a labor of love. That's all. I mean, why translate? I think every translator has a calling, um, which is to make something known to
this
a
is,
wider
I
audience.
think, this is the creative engagement.
Yeah,
This
right.
is because I'm asking this specifically because in our country at least, there is a perception that the translator is an inferior being. I'll not mince words. This is the way I have known. Very leading Malayalam writer, novelist, uh, 15 years ago, in Bashir's birth centenary, he was proudly introducing his Tamil translator as his his fanboy, if a fanboy, as his
Right, right,
yeah,
right.
his servant, kind
Oh,
of
okay.
that kind of
Inferior.
attitude, that
Mm.
kind of attitude of an original author to a translator was prevalent
Yeah, yeah,
in
right.
till very recently.
Mm-hmm.
So that takes away the kind of
Yeah, yeah.
pleasure or independent imagination that you ascribe to a translator. And even now it is, the original author translator kind of thing is there. But things are changing at the conceptual level.
Very much, yeah.
But again, this has to be again and again brought up by the translator or the academics,
Yeah, right.
those who are batting for the freedom of the translator and all that. That I think it will take a longer time than we anticipate because we do not see any kind of opening or being the kind of intellectual freedom that we boast of. It's not in practice, at least. I don't see that. Anyway, it's not a pessimistic thought, but this is fact. Anyway, translation is gaining a lot of attention now, mostly because of the big prices. The translator will get 25 lakhs, and the original author will get only 5 lakhs for JCB. For DSC, it is much more than that. So, translation has gained acceptance, or it is a respectable kind of engagement. So that's good. That is the only good thing about it now. And those who are engaged in actual, real, good translation, their work, their work is rated as being good work.
Are we
So,
short of time? Yeah.
so that,
Okay.
that is the good news. Translation is looking up. Translation is being accepted as an honorable kind of profession. That's good. So why translate? We'll have some meaning. Why translate? Because we love to translate, because we love to create. See, I'm a poet, and I'm also a translator. I'm also a short story writer. I haven't published much, but I have. So these are inseparable things. You can't, again, like what I said again a little while ago, it's not a per word, so many rupees kind of work. It is not. It is an act of love, like you said.
I
Thank
think
you.
we are,
I
we
think
are
the
at the
time
end of the
is up.
time, right? So
Is there any
We have,
question?
sorry, we have
that
2
we can
minutes.
take?
Maybe you can take one question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jobin. I have done a little bit of translation, but a little poetry itself. But just wanted to ask you, since both of you have tried your hand in poetry translation to some extent, so what do you do when there is this vrittam or meter? So do you try to recreate that in English? Because that adds a sort of a musical quality. What is your take on that?
I have tried to keep, it's not easy to keep the same meter as in Malayalam, or, the prasams, the other prasams or the antiprasam. That's not easy, or that's not possible to be repeated in English. But you can keep the beat rhythm. That I have done. I have Anushtup is easy to do that. I have done Sugata Kumari's Pen Kunju Tonnoor with this beat, following this beat method, and it has come out well. And I have done many poems like that, but it is not something, imitating Vrittam as such, or recreating Vrittam as such. It's not possible. It's not at all possible. Sorry. Okay.
One last question.
Yeah, my this thing is I've not studied my mother tongue nor Malayalam because my grandfather and father, they were Tamilians settled in Kerala, but we came out, we were in Calcutta. So I was just asking, but I love so many novels and short stories in Malayalam and Tamil. Do you think that it is possible for somebody who studied in Hindi and English to attempt translation? As you told, it can be done by anyone. So do you think that it is, or is it too challenging?
I think translation can be, you just need if I understand your question, you were saying that a person who is not fully rooted in that.
Yeah, I'm not saying Malayalam or Tamil as a language, but
Right. But I think one certainly needs to have a good understanding of both languages. Otherwise, one cannot afford to be an outsider to any of these languages. So, because you cannot, it's not a literal translation, right? You have to have a feel of that. So the source language, I think, you need to have a sense of belonging and rootedness to the place. Otherwise, the translation can end up sounding very flat. So I think, yeah, that goes with the, it's a necessity, yeah.